This is Musical Talk.
Musical Talk.
The UK's independent musical theatre podcast.
Musical Talk. The UK independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos Ribbits, not to be mistaken with
Nick Hudson.
As if I could be. Hello, Nick. I'm with you today, and we're going to be talking. Well, today's a bit of a sort of hot pot, isn't it? Really, we're going to be.
It's a Lancashire hot pot of musical talk.
Absolutely, with some big potatoes on the top, which is what defines a hot pot over a casserole. Food fans.
That's for food talk, a new product coming soon from
Absolutely.
Musical Talk.
And that's entirely appropriate because later on in the programme, once we've had these delicious pie, we might have a drink. And then we've got a section called Drinks After the Show. So we've got lots of different things coming up. We've got several interviews with people, we've got some reviews, and we've got some bits and pieces, including chat between Nick and myself. So we're going to start immediately with that. Now, Nick, you've actually recently been talking to, well, I have to say, the greatest name in theatrical reviewing, and certainly musical theatre reviewing, in Britain today. He's Mark Shenton.
Not how he introduced himself, yes, but Mark Shenton is the chief critic of the stage. He reviews far too much stuff for him even to manage, and he's also a theatre critic for the Sunday Express.
And he runs a blog.
And he tweets every second of the day, and he teaches at Arts Ed and lots of other things like that. And he's a lovely chap, and I met up with him to have a talk about a recent event that happened in the world of musical theatre, so I'll whet your appetite for that, listeners. And should we start with that, Thos?
I think we should, absolutely. Why not start with one of the greats? So here's a conversation between you and Mark Shenton.
Mark, thank you for joining us on Musical Talk.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
We had the Tony Awards 2 weekends ago.
Yes.
And tell me your thoughts on Matilda versus Kinky Boots is the discussion.
Right. It's such a complicated story with the Tony Awards because, of course, the thing is that unlike the Olivier's, they matter so much commercially that they're never cut and dried. In fact, the other thing, important thing to point out is that there are 853 voters, which is, and obviously mostly industry voters. There's a tiny journalistic band. There's about 20 journalists on that.
New York Times, probably.
No, the New York Times isn't on it. It's the members of the New York Critics Circle, of which the New York Times is not a member. Because they keep themselves out of all of that. But there are 20 journalists, so it's mainly industry people. And as a result, the Tony Awards kind of reflect an industry consensus. In this case, it's a consensus for supporting your own, I think. I mean, they've had years and years and years of supporting, and British shows have win Tony Awards a lot. And also, of course, plays, by and large, dominate the Tony Awards from Britain, imports, although this year they didn't have any. So this year, it seems that there was a swing towards rewarding their own. But also what happened, I think, was Matilda came in with a lot of expectation, a lot of hype, that it was definitely the one to beat, and there seems to be on the ground a bit of a backlash against that too. It didn't help that the RSC chose to bring it in by themselves with only one Broadway producer on board, the Dodgers. They'd been solicited by every producer in town who had wanted to do it, and they weren't given the rights to do it.
Because usually you see more producers on Broadway than there are performers in the show.
You do, and this one actually, interestingly, only has two names above the title, the RSC and the Dodgers, and then there's a with thanks to long below the title. So it's actually a unique form of billing, and I think that probably didn't help their cause because it helped to piss people off a lot that they came in so arrogantly that they were going to take the town, etc. So you've got this huge army of voters, which is one huge factor, and then of course it comes down to taste, and it may well be that Matilda also didn't seem to tie into Broadway taste, that its sensibility is possibly too English. I mean, Kinky Boots is a perfectly respectable, perfectly well done piece of work.
You're the first person I've ever met who's been lucky enough to see Kinky Boots.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my favourite show of all time. It's also not my least favourite show of all time. It's a very accomplished, polished piece of staging. Jerry Mitchell, is a master stager. Cyndi Lauper, it's great to have another voice on Broadway. I mean, I think it's fantastic when pop writers cross the barrier and go over to Broadway, because Broadway certainly needs a new sound, and pop writers help to provide it. I don't dispute any of that, and it's also got some great performances. I mean, Billy Porter's a local performer who's performed in musicals for many years on Broadway, never had his due. And you know what? The other thing I would strenuously say is, thank God it's Kinky Boots and not Motown. I mean, if Motown had won the Best Musical Award, that would have upset me hugely. Having said all of that, I do think Matilda was robbed. So, you know, I'm defending Kinky Boots, but at the same time also think that Matilda is, on virtually any terms, the far superior show.
Why?
It's a show of real art, heart and craft. I mean, it's one of those shows that only comes around once in a decade. It's certainly the best British musical this decade, best British originated one.
Or ever, according to the New York Times.
Well, yes, the best one they've ever imported. I mean, having said that, you know, I think Broadway has also produced two outstanding shows this century so far, Next to Normal and Once, although Once is largely British originated, British-Irish originated. Those are two extraordinary musicals, and of course Next to Normal we've not seen here either, and I long to see here.
Now, you've been to the Tony Awards, and I want to ask you, what's that experience like?
Yeah, actually I've been many times over the years. I usually go to the rehearsal on the day, and those are great fun because you see the show without knowing who the winners will be, but you see the musical numbers, and then I watch the Tonys themselves on TV because it's more fun to watch it with friends, really. Actually being there, it's like every award ceremony, way too long. It goes on for too long, and it's too boring for words. Even the Oliviers here this last year, they were zhuzhed up a bit with with TV telecast coming back, but they were still dull to watch when you were there. They went on for interminable. There's no way to do awards in a sexy way. How do you want to yes, there are 3 or 4 categories that matter, but actually when you sit through it, yet another lighting design, sound design, and on Broadway they have lighting design for a musical, sound design for a musical, lighting design for a play, the sound design for a play. It goes on and on for hours.
Are the Tony Awards and in this year specifically still political?
They're always intensely political because unlike virtually any other theatre awards ceremony, they actually matter. And particularly the one for the Tony Award for Best Musical, that one has a monetary value. The moment a show gets that, it can then tour more easily because it goes on the road with a Best Musical imprint on it. It also spikes the box office immediately in New York because people will want to go and see the latest Tony Award winner. What's interesting here, the Oliviers were announced, and Top Hat won the top honour.
It's closing.
And it's closing. I mean, it was announced almost a week later that
But let's face it, the competition wasn't exactly.
No, it was, and of course we also don't have a clearly defined season here, so it seems to be a movable feast. And this year, if Booker Moore had opened just a couple of weeks earlier, it would have swept. If Mary Row Long had transferred a couple of weeks earlier, it might have swept. Once also missed the boat this year, so we had 4 kind of rather weak shows actually.
And Charlie as well.
And Charlie, but yeah, although that's even later. So obviously next year is going to be a major. There's a lot in contention for next year. Let's hope Once is still here and can be in contention. Merrily will probably be forgotten by next year, sadly. But yes, I mean there are many contenders for next year.
Do you like the way we don't do it like the New York way of having the seasons and pushing all these shows and relying on awards and stuff?
The season in New York actually creates a very top-heavy year there, where most shows tend to open, the bulk of the shows that open or are in contention for the Tony Awards open between February and April. And in fact, March and April are insane in New York, with all the number of shows that open. Whereas we have shows opening every week of every month of every year, so it's sort of relentless, the tide here. Whereas in New York, but then in New York they only have.
You can plan your holidays better.
Yes, they only have 40 odd shows open in New York across the year. We have over 100. 103, I think, we're eligible for Olivier Awards this year. So that shows we have far more shows. Opening at all the time, and then of course there's also the Fringe and off Broadway on each side of the Atlantic. So there's always plenty to see.
It's interesting, though, you were saying how winning the Tony Award can really help a show, but I read that it's Matilda's ticket sales that have been bigger than Kinky Boots. Kinky Boots doesn't really scream family show to anyone, does it?
No, but I don't think that's the reason. I mean, there's room for an adult musical on Broadway. I mean, Next to Normal ran for nearly 2 years, and there's nothing for kids in that. Kids don't necessarily sell tickets. I mean, interestingly, Annie, the revival, is not doing terribly well. It's not done boffo box office. I mean, the other thing is that they have this telecast, and Matilda did a great number on the telecast, and that would have helped ticket sales no end. And of course nowadays the telecast is not just in the moment, but it's on YouTube forever thereafter, and people are watching this stuff. It will be interesting to see how this plays out in the months to come, because when they both shows went head to head, Michael Riedel, who writes this brilliant column in the New York Post, described them both as nervous hits, which is to say they were both doing well enough, but they weren't selling as well as, say, Book of Mormon or, God forbid, Motown. Motown's selling terribly well, despite not even being nominated for Best Musical. So there are lots of other things at play always with the season there.
I was really impressed with the score for Christmas Story.
Yes, interestingly, that's coming back this Christmas, but to that terrible theatre at Madison Square. So, I like their other work, Dogfight, that they did at Second Stage as well, the two composers. And I do think it's always fantastic when a young team sort of arrive on Broadway, from nowhere virtually. Christmas Story has got a sort of has got an appealing score. I mean, I did see it last year when it was done on Broadway. It's not a smash hit show. It's and of course it's locked into can only play 6 weeks every Christmas.
That's enough, though, isn't it, for some people?
And indeed, and they probably will come back every year.
Have you seen Charlie?
Not yet. I'm going on Friday.
Are you very curious about it?
I am, absolutely. I've interviewed Mark Shenton and Scott Whitman about it. I've interviewed Sam Mendes about it. I've interviewed Doug Hodge about it. So I feel like I already know an awful lot about the show without having seen it. But I'm still dying to see it.
And I'll leave you with this. You were sensible to wait.
I know that they have been making lots of changes. The day I went to interview Doug Hodge, they were putting in the glass elevator for the first time.
Thank God for that.
And that hadn't gone in before. And there was also a surprise at the end of the show, which I'm not going to give away, which also went in for the first time that night. Shows take time to
especially one
find
as
their feet.
Huge as this.
They do. I mean, you can't. Although having said that, nowadays everything's open for business the day it opens for business, and you can't stop the tidal wave of opinion that happens via Twitter.
You can't stop the tweet, I think should be the...
Yes, exactly. to quote Mark Shenton and Scott Whitman, you can't stop it, but also it seems that you can't stop newspapers either, because the Sunday Telegraph waded in and did a review, which I thought was shameful. But of course, if the whole world if the whole world is changing,
shameful.
We're done for. So. There will come a point, and I'm going to argue this quite fiercely. I think that where shows have to be show ready the day they start performances, because there's no.
Especially, I mean, with Charlie, the one thing which I think will make it struggle is the prices, and the fact that if you want a good seat for this show that isn't on the edge of an aisle, in previews it was £79. And that will go up to £89 per person. There's no family discount. There's no child discount. And I think that'll... last question. Do you think musical theatre is elitist now? As regards the big shows?
It's a supply and demand business, basically, and if they've only got a fixed inventory, they've got 2,000 seats a night, which is a lot of seats to sell. But if the demand is such that they can sell the tickets at that price, they will sell them at that price, and in due course the prices will come down, because once the demand stops, then they will have to reduce their prices.
We're not Broadway in that respect, where it's much more expensive.
You know what? I keep saying Broadway's not that much more expensive anymore. We're now heading towards being virtually on a level, and I always think it's extraordinary that everything on Broadway costs them more to produce, and their actors' equity minimum there is 3 times the actors' minimum here. They're paying more expenses there, so their ticket prices have to be higher. We have lower expenses across the board, and yet our ticket prices are nearly equivalent. So who's pocketing the difference?
Well, Mark, thank you very much for coming on Musical Talk, and we'll hear from you again soon.
Yes, indeed.
Tell you what's interesting to me about Mark Shenton, because you were sort of suggesting before that very interesting interview that he's sort of he's such a polymath. He's everywhere. As you say, he tweets every.
I think there's 5 of them sort of.
Yes, that's right, the Shenton brothers, and they one of them has a sleep while the others go off and do it. That's how they keep their energy recharged. But it's interesting because he is someone you actually see on the circuit. You know that his reviews are real because you see him in the theatre. It's been interesting to me that we've been doing Musical Talk since 2006 now. It's been running a few years. We've been to see a few shows. And I can tell you that I don't know Mark Shenton to speak to, but I know him by sight because I've seen him at so many shows that I've gone to. He's been sitting behind me, or there he is in the audience, or he comes in and you think, oh, there's Mark Shenton. He's the famous reviewer. And so he really is a man who, you can legitimately believe everything he writes. Whether you agree is another matter, because that's the thing about reviewing. It's one man's view. But he sees his shows. There have been, forgive me, the late Sheridan Morley, bless him. We loved him as a person, but towards the end of his life, he was famous for falling asleep in shows, and there were several stories of reviews that he did where he wasn't there or he snoozed his way through it. Whereas I think you can honestly say that, Mark pays a lot of attention.
The good thing about Mark Shenton is, unlike other elder critics, he actually likes musicals and knows a lot about them.
And it's funny because that's something that we talk about here on Musical Talk, isn't it? On the whole...
I would never have guessed.
No, but we do like musicals. Of course we do. And there's a wide range, and some are good and some are rubbish and some have got something in between. But on the whole, our general attitude is they are good. But I love theatre as well. But I don't make that dichotomy. I can see there's a difference between speech marks, straight theatre and musical theatre, but at the end of the day they're both good or both bad or both. They stand by each performance, but I don't think you can say I only like straight theatre and musical theatre is cheap and always inferior. It isn't. It does something different because it can do something different, and so it's good to have Mark Shenton's widely, he doesn't just do musicals, but he does do a lot of musicals, there's no doubt about it. So it's good to have a specialist who's positive, who's not us.
Musical Talk.
We asked on Twitter a week or so ago what should we talk about, and one of the things that came up was King Kong, the musical.
When you say he came up, he came up the Empire State Building?
Yes.
And did he whisper in your ear very loudly?
He roared in my ear.
Did he? The grill of my dreams.
King Kong, it's playing in Australia at the moment.
It's an Australian musical.
In Melbourne, yes.
Right.
Book and lyrics by, I think book, music and lyrics by Americans. So they're obviously trying it out in Australia as a tryout before Broadway, and Broadway is planned for next year. And it's surprising a lot of people. The reviews are saying this, I call it the ghost syndrome.
You mean the special effects are rather splendid?
Yes, and the songs and the book
have yet to impress. Is that the nice way of putting it?
Are a bit weak. But let's face it, you go for the show to see the 25-foot puppet, don't you?
Well, I wouldn't, you see. That sounds horrific to me. It's not the story is a very interesting story, but if the score's not up to it, why would I go and see a 25-foot puppet? This is actually the fundamental difference between you and me, I think, Nick. Is it a puppet?
Yes, it is. It's
actually it's a physical puppet.
It's a physical puppet operated by about 12 people. It is designed in-house by an Australian puppet company. They do lots of, most famously, Walking with Dinosaurs Live. They did that, which is a BBC touring arena show.
Which was CGI on television, of course.
Which looks jolly fun to see live. The one song that was released at the kind of press event just sounded exactly like an Adele song, so they're obviously going for a more poppy...
Oh, she wrote the last Bond theme. I've heard of her.
I doubt she wrote it, Thos. I think someone else...
She sang it.
She warbled it, could say.
I thought she did rather a good job, actually, so I've heard of her, so carry on.
The song they released sounded exactly like an Adele song. It might just be the singing style, but it was a kind of generic lullaby ballad that she sung to the ape. One part of me thinks this is absolutely laughable, and the other part of me says it's actually quite an achievement in theatre if you can do a puppet of this scale and make it seem emotional and stuff, because the face of the puppet is that detailed that they can raise an eyebrow or half of an eyebrow and stuff like that. Because
is it animatronic as well? It must be, surely. It can't just be human.
It's pure. It's a puppet.
Yes, but you can have puppets with animatronic faces.
I know very little about it, but it's certainly one to watch, I think.
I mean, you were talking about the emotional content there. I mean, you're right. On paper, it sounds absolutely nonsense. But let's face it, King Kong is a perennial story. I mean, 1933, I think, with the original version, and that was a sort of a stop-motion puppet. And yet, at the time, Fay Wray, who was the heroine that the ape rather fell for...
As he fell down the Empire State Building.
Well, yes, absolutely. He did fall in a very real way. It was considered to be emotionally satisfying as a film. It wasn't a nonsense film. It was considered good. Now, they remade it twice. I think there was a remake in 1977, and then there was a remake about 5 years ago. I don't think either of those really...
Famous Peter Jackson remake.
Well, we say famous. I don't think any of them made great shakes, shall we say. The original is still...
The cinema shook.
First and best is the one. I go for Fay Wray. I've got to tell you a story my father told me. Fay Wray was the heroine of the early 1930s. Her big film is King Kong, 1933. My father used to tell me that in the 70s, he was a bank manager, he used to occasionally go off and get his hair cut in his lunch break. And he said he had this ancient old...
Thos doesn't suffer from that ailment anymore.
I don't have to go to the hairdressers very often, indeed. But he went off to the barbers, and he had an incredibly ancient barber who used to sing, amongst others. He's a proper singing barber. But he used to sing. But when he wasn't singing...
These are my friends.
Yeah, not from Sweeney Todd. But he used to tell my father how he still carried a torch for Fay Ray. Now, this is in 1980 or something like that. 50 years beforehand, Fay Ray was an ancient star to my father, so how she is to me, and yet, I can take her off the top of my head and see her emoting with a gorilla. So it'll be interesting to see if any modern actresses have the same range.
I hope the show comes here. I won't travel to Broadway to see it, but It'll be interesting to see. It's always exciting when a big new musical comes along.
Yes, is it though? I mean, once again, let's just talk briefly but seriously about, you are more keen on the spectacle. To me, that sounds like someone said, this is a spectacle musical. But
you said yourself, it's also a very emotional story.
No, it can be an emotional story. Whether it shall be...
But that's what musicals can do. They can enhance the emotion tenfold, I think. Purely just by singing a song, something becomes incredibly more emotive.
Certainly, it can make you angry if it's a rubbish song, yes.
And speaking of big shows, I want to end this episode on the big show in town at the moment. But before that, we mentioned it earlier. Here's a new section done by two lovely friends of ours called Jen Green and Carline Wigmore. And this is their new section called Drinks After the Show.
Hi, this is Jen Green.
And this is Carline Wigmore. And why don't you join us for Drinks After the Show?
We're here at Riverside Studios on the press night of Payback, the musical. We're going to be sitting down to talk with Simon Grief, the director of the show, later. We were also here last week to see the closing night of The Great Gatsby on stage.
There's something that I really enjoyed about The Great Gatsby on stage rather than in film, and I think it had to do with the dialogue working better dramatically on stage than it does for film. How did you feel about that, Jen?
Yes, I mean, the book, which I reread before we saw the show, is actually very dramatic, and there's actually a very small amount of dialogue in there, almost all of which is used in this stage adaptation.
It's not only used in this stage adaptation, it's used in every single film version I've seen. There's certain key lines that we always hear in every adaptation, and they just, for me in film, they sound a bit stilted, but I didn't get that sense on stage, and I think that was one of the best things about seeing it as a theatre piece rather than a film.
What I was really interested to see going into this show was how they would manage the narrator aspect of The Great Gatsby. As every good GCSE student in the country will know, The Great Gatsby has as its main character a narrator who's very passive and doesn't actually participate in the action and really comments on it. So I was really interested to see that Linny Reedman, the director and adapter, and Joe Evans, the composer and lyricist of The Great Gatsby, had taken that back a little bit and also given Daisy a much stronger voice. Carline, have you got views on that?
Yes, I think Daisy is a difficult character to master. There's something kind of undefined about her in the original story, and I think that's something. Daisy's going to be the character that perhaps is a struggle to write for in every version I've seen anyway. We don't quite know if she's good or bad. We don't know if we like her or not. And there were some slight differences in this version than the original story.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, in that actually all the characters in the novel are very enigmatic, and you end up quite ambivalent about them as people, and seeing it on stage you get a very different idea of them. I think it's to do with them actually being there in person in front of you, acting out their emotions, but they're much easier to sympathise with or take against.
Yeah, I would agree that you sympathise most with Daisy in perhaps this musical setting than you do with any of the other adaptations I've seen for film.
And interestingly, one of the decisions made by Linny Reedman as director and adapter that ventures furthest from the structure of the book is to actually give Daisy the opening scene, which makes us sympathise more with her as the central character.
absolutely. But we both really enjoyed it, and we wish them well in their future.
And they do have plans for the show after the Riverside Studios run, so do keep an eye on it. It's The Great Gatsby, directed and adapted by Linny Riedman, with music and lyrics by Joe Evans.
We're just about to sit down with Simon Grief to talk about Payback the musical. He was the director and also the developer of the show.
So Payback the musical, I think, is going to be a familiar concept to anybody who's ever watched Jeremy Kyle. So it's very much set in the world of reality TV and media culture. Does it take over our souls? Probably the best person to answer that question is Simon. Maybe you could tell us about the impetus for the show and the ideas behind it.
Yes, well, you mentioned the media coverage and exploitation of people who want to go on television and have their 15 minutes of shame. And the concept of the show is set 3 years in the future, where paternity cases are now put on television and are now legalised. So if you're summoned onto this TV show and you end up being the father of a child, then you have to pay a fine or possibly go to jail. And of course, this is all set in this imaginary TV studio at AMTV, and the show is run by our Jeremy Kyle type character called Matt Matthews. Yes, and the first characters we see are what you expect on a Jeremy Kyle type show.
Wow, and this is a really unusual musical, I would say. It has multiple storylines, and were there any particular challenges with that aspect of it?
Yes, I mean, obviously, sort of interweaving the real couple that we have, which is a young Brazilian couple from Rio, trying to make them real, but still live in this world of musical theatre, where they're then going to be thrust into this reality TV show. So to bring those together was always a challenge, and I suppose to try and create a world where this show can exist and people can start to believe it might be real and buy into the whole package of the show and the concept.
And was there a specific reason why the couple come from Brazil? Was that a musical style choice or a narrative?
No, actually,
one?
first and foremost, it was musical style. Paul Rayfield loves the Brazilian feel.
I think that really
style.
comes out in the show.
Great. And also, I think the couple needed to be from elsewhere. They needed to be abroad, and we tried to sort of express that the show is watched by 1.5 million 1.5 million viewers. So maybe they could also be across the world. So it was sort of reaching out as far as possible to get this alien couple to suddenly be on a British TV show, and the young boy who's essentially on the show is out of his depth. So that was sort of why it was so far. But first and foremost, the style and the feel, and to give the show another musical element.
And you needed a contrast, a sharp contrast.
Absolutely, yeah. To show that this really is a young boy fish out of water, as opposed to your Tracy and Stacey from Essex, who we know why they're there and we know probably how they got there. Where he, is very different and he's real and he's hopefully the person we empathise towards.
And that gives a great opportunity for different musical styles as well, because you have the contrast of that with the very reality TV.
Absolutely.
Musical style.
I mean, even with the
show.
reality TV, most of the songs sort of burst out of the scene and have a musical sort of explosion, and they're done in different styles as well. So hopefully, in the style of where the scene was going, we get this sort of a musical element of building the scene and thrusting us into musical theatre, and we hope it works, and most importantly, entertains.
Yeah, I think a question we both had was what was involved with the choice of putting the show into the future? Did that have special significance?
Yes, it happened relatively late in the development process, actually, because inevitably there are obvious contrasts to other shows about reality TV hosts. It's inevitable, and of course we've already said about the Jeremy Kyle type character, and that's what I've said all from day one of the development process. He is that type of British character. The reason to push it, I suppose, is to actually show us that the future is actually is really close, and the idea of legalising paternity cases is nearly upon us, actually. To privatise these paternity cases is nearly here, and only just as we started rehearsals, there was a big spread in the papers about privatising the courts. So we are so close. So the idea of 3 years in the future, and also, thankfully, being half set in Brazil, it happens to be the Olympics in 2016.
Wow.
It seemed to nicely tie in that this young couple are searching for that bit more, and it might not come out of the Olympics, it might come from some random British TV show. So it kind of started to work, and I suppose also pushing the boundaries. If we show that it's 1997 in our prologue flashback, then we go straight to present day 2013 and suddenly push 3 years in the future, what is going to be possible? I suppose it gives us a bit of license to have much more fun and exploit people a bit more, I suppose. If we did it now, we couldn't really quite do any sort of exploitation for legal reasons, I would have thought. So we've made it up and pushed it a bit further.
Yeah. And we all know that musicals don't just appear out of nowhere. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the development process and when did this show actually start? Because it feels very rooted in that media culture frenzy.
Absolutely. Paul Rayfield, the writer, I think it's been in his head a while. I was first brought on board about 3 years ago when it was quite a different concept and story. And when I say quite a different, it was very stripped back. There wasn't much of the meat around the bones, as it were. And with every new musical, it's taken years of development. Mainly because of not rushing the process, I suppose. Also funding. If any development process isn't subsidised, then one has to find funding to do it. And Paul has managed to find angels and backers and people who appreciate what he's trying to do and like his work. And over the years, we've managed to do hopefully some successful workshops to get it this far. But yes, I mean, I'm certainly a proud supporter of new writing, but making sure that it's developed efficiently. I mean, any writer would probably argue, well, how do you ever know when it's finished? And I think at some point you have to probably just present. And I do believe this is probably where it needs to be presented. Yes, of course, there are tiny things that I'm thinking, oh, we could rewrite that, or Paul could go and rewrite a new scene or a better song or whatever. But if you keep doing that, you'll always be rewriting and rewriting your show.
Yep. Well, there's a nice energy in the audience tonight, and I know you're just at the beginning of your run. Would you like to tell us how we can get tickets to your show and where we go for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the Riverside has a very efficient website where you can buy your tickets straight through there, and of course, you can call direct at the box office. Yes, and tonight was the press night, and we hope that like yourselves, we hope you enjoyed it and tell people. And in this modern day and age, and in our TV studio, we talk about Tweet and Facebook and social networking. I think that's such a brilliant method to spread the word and try and get people to come and support.
And how long are you running for?
We're running for the next sort of 2.5 weeks, so it's through to the 30th of June. So it's not a long time, but it's because one can't run for months in the hope that we find an audience. So.
Exactly. Well,
I've got one very last question very quickly, and without wishing to spoil it for anybody who comes to see the show, I just want to ask, does the ending mean that you think the media's turned over a new leaf?
Makes you wonder. I genuinely think you should come and see it and see what you make of it. Genuinely, yeah.
You heard it here, you need to go and see it for yourselves.
Well, thanks so much, Simon, and good luck for the rest of your run.
Pleasure, thank you very much.
That was Jen Green and Carline Wigmore there. Thank you very, very much. Please do check out Payback the Musical at the Riverside Studios, and also, if you can, look up Great Gatsby the Musical, because it's obviously Gatsby fever is still flying throughout the country.
How very flattering you are. I'm not sure it's doing anything of the kind, but it obviously has a certain amount of currency, I think, will be at least a politer way of putting it.
The big show here, undoubtedly, one of the biggest shows of all time, is now Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Well, hang on, and may I add, hang on, of all time? You mean all time thus far? Because I have no doubt that people are going to come up with a bigger, more exotic show after this. But for the moment, you mean? It's or let's just put this into non-hyperbole language. It's quite a big show currently on.
Yes. If it is still on by the time this episode goes out, which I presume it will be, because it's selling incredibly well. And
I can tell you that it is on, because a friend of mine is desperate to get tickets, and I think they're just releasing some new ones for next year.
Good.
Which will be 2014 year fans.
Fans of years, you're listening to the wrong podcast.
Really?
Year Talk will launch alongside Food Talk soon.
You are listening to exactly the right podcast. We've been going for years. We'll probably go for many more years yet.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the 5th musical adaptation of this story, as we talked about on the podcast before, is playing at the Theatre Drury Lane, directed by Sam Mendes. I went to see...
a preview, I think, wasn't it?
I went to see the first preview after it was cancelled and moved a couple of days later. So I do have to... we can
There's a health warning
yes,
here, isn't there?
We can talk about
change.
We can talk about the show because the reviews have been out. We don't know what they're like because they haven't come out yet at the time of recording. Mixed would be my guess, but we'll see what happens. I went to the first preview, and it's a very, very theatrical show, as one would expect in a theatre.
Yeah, controversial so far. Is that because it's the Menier?
It's not the Menier. It's the Theatre or Drury Lane.
Oh, yeah.
You seem to think that this show would play at the Menier Chocolate Factory.
I think it ought to jolly well play at the Chocolate Factory because
that'll be the revival in 20 years' time when they do it with actor musicians.
I see. Yes, of course. Because I was thinking that so many good things have come from the Menier, and it knows how to use its space. But it isn't a Menier show. That is, as you absolutely say, me muddling up chocolate factories. Only at the moment could that happen, but. So it's on Drury Lane,
yes,
which is an enormous stage.
A big old barn of a.
Yeah, it's an ancient theatre as well. So
it's burnt down about 4 times. I think that's another episode about the history of the Drury Lane,
which is the oldest running theatre in London, isn't it? But it's a big old stage.
It is 100 feet deep.
That moves against intimacy, but it does allow for spectacle. So let's talk spectacle first. It's your specialist subject, really. Is it a spectacle?
Yes and no. I think
one for each eye.
The thing about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is one has so many images in their head of what this factory looks like. Whether you're a fan of Roald Dahl or not, undoubtedly you've seen either Johnny Depp do it or Gene Wilder or both.
Or,
maybe.
And if you're of an age early enough, you'll have seen...
or did Fay Wray do a version as well?
No, but it was on Jack and Nori, which was... a long-running British TV series for children, which went right up until the early 90s, where essentially it was just a talented actor reading a story with the occasional illustrations from the story.
Who is the actor for that?
I think, in my head, I remember it as Kenneth Williams reading the stories of, because it's Charlie in the Chocolate Factory.
Do you Kenneth Williams?
No, if you insist, I will. But more to the point, the pictures were by the great Quentin Blake, who's one of the great... I'm not even going to say children's illustrators, one of the great illustrators of the 20th and 21st century, because he's still with us, I'm pleased to say. Fantastic artist. And his pictures, when you say Charlie in the Chocolate Factory to me, I first think of Kenneth Williams' voice and the pictures of Quentin Blake. I secondly think of Gene Hackman. I don't think of Gene Hackman. I secondly think of Gene Wilder and pure imagination. And funny enough, a very brief cameo, I don't know why this has leapt into my head, but in that film, there's a brief cameo of Tim Brooke Taylor in front of a computer saying, I've invented a computer that will tell us where the golden tickets are. And then the ticker tape comes out of this computer. This is the era we're talking. And it says, I do know, but I'm not telling you because that would be telling.
Then he eats it or something, doesn't he?
It's a tiny little throwaway cameo, but it's very funny. I've never seen the Johnny Depp version, but... that's what I think. But you're right. Everyone has some kind of image in their head of this. Can it therefore possibly live up to
And
it?
we have to say this is a new musical with songs with music by Mark Shenton and lyrics by Mark Shenton and Scott Whitman of Hairspray and Smash and Catch Me If You Can and other such
big musical
variety of shows. I'll make you very happy to start off with, Thos, that the musical the musical starts with a 5 minutes movie illustrated by Quentin Blake specifically for the show.
You see, that would have been wonderful if you'd used the word film, but you did descend into the American version of the movie. Was it a motion picture? You do know we've since had talkies, don't you? We've moved on since the movie.
It starts off with a silent movie with a narration done by Willy Wonka, who's played very well in this production by Douglas Hodge. He sort of plays him as a stand-up comedian, but we'll talk about that in a bit. And I will say the 5 minute animation was a bit too long.
Really?
Because it would have been much better if it was done still as an animation with the Quentin Blake homage, but still done with actors as well as a song.
Or an interaction, perhaps.
Yes.
One with the other.
And not done... It talks about the creation of chocolate from a little bean to the biggest, sweet that the world has ever seen.
Is that the lyric?
No. and that's the thing, it's not a song.
Yeah.
I think it should be a song, essentially. And then it opens with Charlie singing his song about... essentially, they live on the edge of a dump. And so Charlie goes out to the dump.
Next to Stig.
He finds a broken umbrella and he can make it into a hat stand or something like that. Much in the theme of the show, making something from nothing.
With pure imagination.
And that brings me on to another point, Thos, that it might be an original musical, but pure imagination, isn't it? At the
They've hiked the song from the original film.
They have put... because
which is a Brickus number, isn't it?
It's a Brickus and Newley number, and because the show is produced by Warner Brothers, they obviously hold
the rights,
and so obviously some dealing was done on, and at that point, that was the bit in the moment when everyone went,
What, from their childhood memories and nostalgia?
And the song works incredibly well in the musical.
But does it fit with the other songs? Or does it stick out?
I don't know.
Because it's of a different era.
I mean, Shaman and Whitman do one thing brilliantly, and that is pastiche. So unlike Matilda, which created a completely new musical world as regards the sound, in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory there'll be a disco number, and there'll be a hip-hop number, and there'll timber like that, and there'll be a...
so it's a series of musical styles, in fact.
Especially in the second act when we get into the factory, because the whole of the factory is Act 2, and the whole of the black and white life of Charlie is Act 1.
So Act 1's getting into the place, and Act 2 is being in the place.
And the highlight of Act 1 is when the other families are introduced. I won't reveal how that's done to people who haven't seen the show, but it is absolutely brilliant. And sadly, when I saw the show, the Great Glass Elevator moment was non-existent. As Mark Shenton said earlier, they have now put the Great Glass Elevator into the show, so that's a good relief.
Oh, right, okay.
It does its thing.
Which is an uplifting experience.
Yes. Or downlifting.
Yeah. Of course, if the show does well, we might be in that very rare world of a sequel.
Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator may happen.
It's perfectly possible, isn't it?
But that
would be a cheap set.
Well, that was a kind of crappy book by Roald Dahl, wasn't it? Or did you...
Outrageous thing to say.
Well, it wasn't as good. I mean...
No, of course it wasn't as good.
No.
It was a sequel, for goodness sake.
Have I piqued your interest, Thos? Are you still not into the Roald Dahl milieu?
Well, that's a very interesting point. As it happens, the friend I was telling you about earlier who's trying to buy tickets wants me to go along with him, so I shall be seeing it at some stage.
Next year.
Probably not until 2014, continuing to listen year fans. So it's something I'm intrigued to see, but it's not something I'm desperate to see. Let's put it this way. If it closed tomorrow, which it won't, but if it closed tomorrow, I don't think I'd go to my grave saying, I wish I'd seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Conversely, when I go, I'm sure to enjoy it rather more than I think I'm going to. And I don't know why I don't think I'm going to. Because I enjoyed the original film. I never wanted to see the Johnny Depp version because I so enjoyed the original film. And as I say, I've got Kenneth Williams and Quentin Blake running around my head. Get out!
The only problem I have with and it's not to do with the musical does... It takes the story very well and it doesn't mess with it. And again, I have a slight problem with that because Matilda, they don't mess with the story, but they augment it and they
dramaturg it into a musical.
Yes, and they make Matilda do something as opposed to Charlie, who's just
he's quite passive. Anyway.
He's a passive protagonist, really. He doesn't.
His grandpa's more interesting than he is.
Yeah, and Charlie gets the golden ticket. I'm giving it away, listeners. But...
Oh no. That would be a twist if he didn't.
Charlie gets a golden ticket and Grandpa Joe sings a song. Surely that would be Charlie's big moment to sing a song.
Yes, I agree.
But I can't comment for what they've done because I haven't seen it for a while, and I am looking forward to going back.
It'll be interesting to see what the changes are. Yeah. If you were there at the very beginning on the previews, including the introduction, as you say, of a lift. That's curious. Would you say, on the whole, it's destined for success from
absolutely.
your point of view? Not just because you know it's taking money hand over fist.
I think it's long overdue as regards seeing this story, this very, very visual story, in the place where true visual excitement belongs, which is the theatre. Cinema only does it a bit for me, but to see...
Well, I agree with you there.
The factory appear in front of you.
You get an atmosphere in a theatre.
I just wish they did a bit more with it. The sets aren't as amazing as I wanted them to be, but I wanted them to have smells in the theatre or something to that level of...
Even of just confectionery is a very easy smell, because you can go to any of the theme parks and it all smells of chocolate.
Even the Charlie and Chocolate Factory ride at Alton Towers, but that's for another...
Yes, well, funny, I didn't know it was called that, but I remember because there used to be Cadbury's World little...
And the M&M store in Leicester Square, you walk in there and you can smell the chocolate. So.
I don't walk in there, not since they've started doing those ridiculous adverts where they trail forthcoming films. That's why I don't go to the M&M shop. I go to the Smarties shop and I buy some Smarties. Because this is a British podcast. Moving on.
But you can't buy Smarties thongs, can you? Like you can in the M&M store, as we shall call it.
Yes, but how shall I put this? There's no earthly reason to anyway! Anyway, moving on.
And I would have liked to have seen a bit more allusions in this show. There are some wonderful moments. and stuff has been added since I saw it.
Bearing in mind that the narrative drives things for me, do you think I would enjoy it?
I think you like the lyrics. I hope they've slowed them down since I first saw it.
To draw them so you can listen to them.
Yeah, because a lot of the kids' stuff was a bit lost on me, but it was the first preview,
of course,
so...
and children's diction is always invariably much poorer than anyone else's.
And I think Scott Whitman is one of the better patter song writers of our time.
Now you're talking.
And list songs and stuff like that. And there's some wonderful line when the grandparents are, they're singing themselves to sleep, and they say, "We're gently counting our sheep, and we hope we don't die in our sleep," which was
fair enough.
Quite a Roald Dahlian line, I think.
Yes, there's a touch of the dark and the piquant.
Yes, it's certainly a show worth seeing. I think it'll do very well here, very well on Broadway. It's the most famous of the Roald Dahl stories, as is evident by the 5 musicals that there are of it.
Certainly children's stories, yeah.
Yes, one has to not think, however, and Mark Shenton talked about this with us, that this is not a cash-in on Matilda. This musical has been in the works for about 7 or 8 years now.
Oh, right.
It was thought of way before Matilda was even conceived.
So it's more a child of the new version of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or
yes.
Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins.
Oh.
So there we are. That's this week's episode. Thos, always a pleasure to wax lyrical with you. And
Absolutely.
musical, as we say.
Indeed. But quite a wide-ranging set of things to talk about as well, if I may say.
Yes, I'm exhausted. I'm going to sleep now. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk was presented by Nick Hudson and Thos Ribbits and edited by Nick Hudson. Copyright Musical Talk 2013. Please visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk or follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/musicaltalk. Bye-bye.